Welcome back to another episode from Pro Engineering, and this one for me is very special. This is going to be another buyer's guide covering what I believe to be one of the absolute greatest RC cars ever made. Sorry, someone got upset about that. This is the Nikko Turbo Panther. It was made basically as a miniature version of the Nikko Bison, the Bison being a 1/10 scale vehicle. This particular one here is my first ever RC car. It has been restored because, as you can imagine, it was in rather poor condition, but I simply could not let this car die. Regardless of how much abuse this car took, to this day, its electronics are fully operational. In fact, this is the original radio the car came with. This car came out smack dab in the middle of the golden age of RC. This car has full function. It has a 2-speed remote. Nikko, I believe Nikko pioneered the low and the turbo function on the radio. In fact, one of my favorite parts about this radio is that you can go forward, you can go backward, or when you go into turbo, you have to physically shift into high gear. Now that is awesome. The Tyco Turbo Hopper, the early version that had the 2-stick radio, didn't have that. You just pushed it a little bit farther and it went into high gear. It didn't have this little shift gate, which I thought made this thing absolutely phenomenal. The car does have a 2-speed transmission with low and high, although I found that high is quite fast for this car. Slow and turbo in low gear are quite good and acceptable for this car with NiCads as well as alkalines. High gear, it's one of those gears where the car it almost becomes a little bit uncontrollable. It also has a particular feature where it will only steer under acceleration or reverse. So if you're wanting to go forward and then turn left, you must hold the throttle in the low, high, or reverse while turning left. Otherwise, if you just kind of coast and turn left or right, the front tires will not turn. Also important to note is if you are in high or turbo mode and turn, the car will remain in high. The Turbo Hopper by Tyco will not do that. It will drop into low speed and turn. One of the reasons for that is the Turbo Panther has a differential. The Tyco Turbo Hopper did not have a differential. Looking at the car, these are plastic injection molded bodies. The battery compartment is at the bottom and it will take 8 AA's. However, if you are going to run one of these, the alkalines do not last. I recommend a set of 8 nickel metal hydrides, as NiCads are quite hard to get a hold of today. The car does have suspension at the rear, and it is a single pivot like a Tamiya Grasshopper. It doesn't have a rolling rear axle that'll flex. The front suspension is excellent. It has pogo spring shocks, however, they are hinged at the front and not the inside, which means as you compress the shock, the car's camber does not change. Kind of a neat little feature considering a lot of Tamiya cars did not have this operation. The front suspension I think is quite adequate. It's nice and soft. The rear I've always found to be a bit stiff. However, in order to get the suspension really working, you're gonna have to jump this thing, and that's maybe not something you would do in this day and age. A couple areas to look for if you are wanting to buy one of these. The front frame area here usually breaks off from this piece, so it's possible that you'll look at one on eBay that's quite nice in this area, and when you get the car you'll see hairline fractures here and this front piece will just kind of pop off. Also at the rear, it seems that I would say about 80 to 90% of these cars are missing their rear wing. It is quite a delicate area back here, so it just takes a couple of rollovers or even dropping it when walking around with it and you'll break the rear wing off. Also quite commonly lost are these spotlights. The front ones are original, and notice how beautifully the decals have been applied. These are factory to this car. I went ahead and 3D printed some, so you can find these on my Shapeways page in the Nikko folder. So again, there's a link in the description for Shapeways as well as at the end of the video. These are a nylon and high detail plastic combination, so you can very easily paint these. I'm going to try and zoom in over here, and you can see that, and these are prototypes, but you can see that I very quickly just ran a marker over these embossed KC Daylighter letters, painted the yellow, and it kind of gave that same look of the stock ones. So yeah, those are pretty commonly lost. These are available in 3 colors. To my knowledge, in the United States, it was only the red and the white one available. The red variant was the 27 band one. The white variant is the 48 band one. The red ones are a tad more common, but I haven't seen much of a cost differential between the white and red variations. I did mention that there was a black one available, and I've heard of a yellow one. I've never seen photographs of the yellow one, but the black ones are available. However, to my knowledge, they were not sold in the United States. Sears did sell a tremendously rare version of this in full camouflage. I've only seen one photograph of it, and other than that, I've never seen the car before. You will find a few variations of the Turbo Panther. First off, this front bumper is not factory. This is one of the Ampro front bumpers that you can install. This one has the auxiliary lamps. I also have a variant without the auxiliary lamps. This is the front bumper that many of the cars that you will see will have, especially if the car has the narrow front tires. This car, despite its narrow front tires, came with this bad boy. This sucker, I'm just gonna hold it up to the front of the car, is larger than the entire car. I mean, it's huge. This thing did save the car's life many times. However, it's absolutely grotesque to look at. More common than not, you'll find the thinner front bumper. This, by the way, is the damage that you would normally see to the front of the car. Here it's missing the other half, but this is very common, as is the lack of rear wing. So I'm trying to use this car as a template to make aftermarket pieces that will fit them. Also, things to look out for are the tires. The tires tend to perish over time, especially if the car is being, maybe parked somewhere with its back tire jammed against the floor. If the car has been stored like this, tires typically are in excellent shape, so I wouldn't normally worry about those too much. This is the Mark I version. There is also a Mark II sold both in the US and overseas. The Mark II had a knobby front tire, so it's very similar to the rear. Looked quite handsome in my opinion. I tend to like this one a little bit more because it has more of that buggy appearance, but that knobby front tire was quite nice and did not deter from the car at all. The good news with this car is a very nice example like this one here isn't all that expensive. You're looking, again, this is 2017 money. If you're watching this 10 years from now, I'm sure these prices are going to change. These things, because of their sheer quantity and I suspect higher reliability than the Tyco variants, these typically in this particular shape, you're looking between $90 and $150, usually without a box. With the box, add about 20 bucks to it. I've never seen a new in sealed box one, but as you can see here, this one's quite lovely. This one here came without any cosmetic modification except for the front bumper. However, its electronics were not working. Fully operational and tested ones, again, are going to be a little bit higher, but again, 100 to 120 bucks or so is probably a good ballpark. A damaged one with a wing, 70 to 80, and a kind of trashed one like this one here is still going to be the $50 or so range. Very commonly you'll find these with the entire canopy missing, and at that point the car's there for parts. Let's go ahead and take a look at this car running. Now we've got the Turbo Panther all ready to go with the transponder. Let's see how it runs. One thing of importance here is that when the Turbo Panther is in high gear, the car will not decelerate to turn. Also, when the car is not under acceleration, it also won't turn. So you have to be accelerating and then it'll turn. Let's see how it runs. This is the car in low gear. Again, it's running 1.5 volt AA's. There's 8 of them. It does seem a bit slower than the Turbo Hopper in low gear. However, controllability is quite good. This car does have some issues with the electronics. I don't know if it's due to age or interference, but the car will occasionally, when turning left or right, you'll hear a little bit of a cut out of the motor. Again, we are talking about a 30-year-old car. in 2017, so it's to be expected. And see, the car just kind of stopped. You can do it. There it goes. Let's kick it into high gear. And like the turbo hopper, there's a massive change in speed. This car turns significantly tighter than the turbo hopper did. And like I said, in high gear, this car really, I should say in high speed. I think the car's in slow right now. Let's take a look. And back into low speed. Now I put the car into high, and we'll just kind of see how the car accelerates. It's just, I've got it going into the slow speed. So it does take the car a moment to get going. And in fact, if there's any kind of grade whatsoever, the car simply will come to a crawl. I suspect that the speed control internally is regulating its speed, as my other version of the Turbo Panther that has a more modern ESC, hobby grade ESC, is faster than this car. Let's kick it into high. Actually, I'm going to turn it around because I don't want to flip over. I'm going to go over here and now put it in high. I mean, for it being 1/16 scale, this car is really booking. Yep. Well, now that we've seen the car buzzing around, I can say that for me, it has a tremendous amount of nostalgic value. The sound it makes, the 2-speed throttle as well as 2-speed gearbox, and more in particular that steering operation while only under the throttle or reverse is quite unique. This begs the question of, is this a good car? Should you buy one? And I would have to say that the number one reason to buy this car is going to be nostalgic value. These were very, very popular. A lot of kids had these back in the 1980s. If you are one of those kids, I say go for it, because not only is the car relatively inexpensive for what it is also a ton of fun to drive even today. It is a dune buggy, so it does have pretty reasonable ground clearance. You're looking at about 15 to 20 millimeters of ground clearance, so it actually can go up and down things. This one here has a few glitches every now and then, and that's to be expected for a car whose electronics were not intended to last 30 years. It is a good vehicle to park on your shelf, but as I'm not a big shelfer fan, this is also a magnificent vehicle to drive around. Despite my extensive collection of significantly higher end vehicles, this car still comes out every couple of months for just a little up down on the driveway or even maybe a walk or so. The car runs awesome. This car makes you remember that RC cars are toys, so that's really, really nice for me. I love it, and I would say overall this is an excellent buy. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe if you did like this video. I've got a lot more of these reviews coming up, as well as some awesome future upgrades to a number of cars that I'm just kind of waiting for boxes on Shapeways. please add me on Instagram as well as Facebook. You can find me at Ampro Engineering on both. And in the closing credits, you'll find a link to the band Blue Pinto, who allows me to use their music, as well as a link to my Shapeways shop, where you can find things like the bumper, these lights, and some future upgrades for this car, like a replacement rear wing and this part here in the front. So I hope you enjoyed this, and we will see you next time.